Hey, welcome back to PHP, and in this screencast, I'm going to cover with a week 2 lecture. For the readings for this week, I have you jumping around the book a little bit, and I specify which pages in the chapters to read. If I don't specify the pages, that means to read the entire chapter. So take a close look at that. And in regards of the topics that I'm going to cover in today's lecture, or this week's lecture, we'll be talking about getting started with PHP. I'll talk about data types, which should be pretty similar to what you learned last semester in JavaScript. We'll talk about how to create variables and constants. We'll spend some time talking about HTML forms and what form variables are. Just a few coding rules, and we'll talk about this post superglobal, what that means. And then we'll end up with doing a little demonstration of I'll have you build a database and for storing your with a table for storing your first and last name, and then we're going to create a form that's going to when you input data into that form, when you submit the form, we're going to add that data to your database table. So let's get started. So in with PHP, you can, and I showed you this last week. You can mix in PHP along with your HTML, and this is kind of a trivial example here. In fact, it's not really that great of an example given the fact that it's not dynamic, right? So I could just as easily just put in the H1 tag set in this particular example right here, just such a perfect day. But what happens is that when the left angle bracket question mark PHP tag is encountered by the web server, and in our case, in our VM, that's Apache, it's going to hand all of the information until the closing tag off to the PHP interpreter. And then anything that is going to be echoed out or printed out, and print and echo are very similar, will get handed back to the web server to be output to the web page. And there's I've got here an example, and here I have a bad example. And I usually like to ask my students when I teach face to face, what's the difference between this and this one above and this example down here, and what makes it bad? And what you'll notice is I'm including some style in here. And if at all possible, it's a good idea not to do that. You should be handling that in CSS, or that should be in straight HTML as much as possible. Now there'll be times where you might have to conditionally modify some style, but you should be controlling that with what um, class attributes that you're using from your CSS. Okay, so we just like other programming languages, PHP has comments. We have single line comments, which can we can use a double forward slash, and you're used to that from JavaScript. You can use a pound sign. I don't recommend that. I actually recommend using the two forward slashes for single line comments. And then we can have multi-line comments, which are also similar to JavaScript and Java. Most programming languages use the forward slash for a single line comment, and then slash asterisk, and then anything in between that and a closing asterisk slash will be considered a comment. So now I have here a bad commenting example. So what I mean by that is that it's not bad that we have a comment. The problem is the content of the comment. So if you take a look at this function, it says format phone number, and you pass in a string, and then it has this gobbledygook. And if you don't know what this is a regular expression. So what this comment is saying, we are formatting phone numbers by stripping all characters and putting parens, blah, blah, blah. It's basically repeating exactly what the code or how the code works rather than what we want our function to be doing. And what our function is doing is actually specified in the name of the function. So a better code would be, a better comment would be something like, the business has a requirement that all phone numbers be formatted like this. See, that's a much more intelligent comment, because what if we decided we wanted to change it? Well, this is out of date, but it's a lot easier to rewrite this comment. Um, so your code should say how something is doing. Don't repeat you know, the point is you do want to have comments, but you want your comments to be sort of like a topic sentence for a block of code. Um, and we'll get more into that as we go along the semester. So again, the main block explains why. So we want to say, why are we doing this? Okay, so PHP, like all programming languages, have data types, and you'll see when you see these. Um, I want to say they're kind of brownish orange links. These are links right here, and I mean you to go. I have them there because I want you to go out and read where they go. You know what's in the manual. So we have data types. So this is the data types link in the PHP manual, and it talks about the types of data types that we have, which are scalar and compound. So I'll talk about that in just a second here. So PHP supports the following basic data types, also known as scalars: integers, floats, strings, and booleans. And they work just as you would imagine. Last semester in JavaScript, integers and floats were kind of grouped together in a single data type called numbers. Numbers are actually, they consist of integers, which are whole numbers, and floating point, which are fractional numbers. And I have an example down here. So I talk about what a string is, um, and we can use single quotes and double quotes in strings. And there is a slight difference that I'll talk about in a few minutes here. But you want to make sure if you start with a double quote that you end with a double quote. Likewise, if you start with a single quote, you want to end with a single quote. And you can also use the escape character for embedding a quote as well. So this is kind of interesting right here. This is called the here doc method of quoting strings. And how this works is you would say either print or echo, and you would have these three left angle brackets followed by some character sequence of your choice, typically EOFs, which stands for end of file, or it could be EOB, end of block, whatever you want it to be. And what happens is this is all on its own line, and then every line after that until this character code that you created is encountered on its own line, and semicolons are required in PHP. Um, that everything in between this print triple left angle bracket EOF and then the closing EOF on its own line with a semicolon, all of that is a single string that gets output to the web page. You don't see it used very often, but you might encounter it, so I wanted to cover it. And of course, a Boolean is going to be a logical value that is either going to be true or false. So these are the scalar data types that we have. PHP also supports what are known as composite data types. And think about a composite data type as, and you're familiar with arrays, it's a data structure that holds other items within it, okay, or other pieces of data within it. So we've got arrays, we have objects, which later on in the semester we'll talk about object-oriented programming in PHP. We have null, which still baffles me why this is considered a composite type, but you can assign null to values. And then we have resources. So an array is a collection of values. We'll talk about the two different types of arrays. You can have a numeric array and then something that's known as an associative array. So instead of an arbitrary number that's the key associated with a value at an element location, the key can actually be a string that has meaning um, that's associated to a value contained in that array. So null is, it represents a variable with no value. Um, and a resource data type would be a reference to an external resource. So that would be something like if you, like a file handle or a reference to a database. And we're going to be talking about that today as far as connecting to a database. And objects are a way of representing everyday data. And again, I'll talk about this starting in week 10. Then we have, let's say we want to do some debugging of data types. We have this function called getType, and getType is kind of an interesting function. I'll click out to the manual here, and what it does is it returns the type of the PHP variable value, and the return type is a string. So I think I'm just going to demonstrate how that's used. So to do that, I've already got my VM all fired up and undocked. And so what I'm going to do is log in here. And then I think what I'll do is let's go. Well, first, to make it easy for the lecture, I don't want to type all this stuff in by hand. So we're going to go to this link right here, the data types. But because this is NetLab, I can't copy and paste from my host system to my, excuse me, to my VM. So I'm going to bring up my Chrome browser. And I have a few links I set up here to go out to Blackboard. And I'm going to log in. And enter my password. And then because I don't like this version of it, I click on it again and I can get the version that I like. And let me go to our hybrid. I'll go to the hybrid Blackboard site. And so if you forget what our lecture notes site is, because I need to get this off the lecture notes, you can click here. I actually put a shortcut over here. You can do that as well. So that takes me out to the lecture notes. And let's make that a little bigger here. And we'll go to the lecture notes. Come on down to not week 1. We want to go to week 2. And let's go to the listing right here. Okay, so what I want to do is first I'm going to bring up my file browser tool here. Click on HTML because as I mentioned last week, everything is going to be that we're serving up from our web server is going to be going to local. We're going to start off at localhost. And this page right here, let's make that a little smaller. Oh, one more. There we go. This page right here is the index page, and that is right here. But I'm going to do something in demos in week 2, so that's where I want to put my my files, my PHP scripts and HTML scripts as well. In fact, if I navigate out to demos right over here, you'll see the same hierarchy, the folder hierarchy, as you see right here. And the reason that we can see that and not see all these is because up here at the HTML level, I have an index page, either index.php or index.html. If you notice, there isn't one listed here. If you want to hide your directory structure when you're creating a website, you probably want to have an index page in every one of your folders so people can't see what your folder structure is. But for our development environment, that's okay. So anyways, I'm going to pop things over here, and then as they show up here, I'll just click on them, and then they'll show up in the web server will run them. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the stock editor, And then I'm going to go to the data types here. And I want to go ahead and let me just show you um, this script first before I go ahead and run it. So what I'm doing here, and if this, don't get freaked out if you don't understand this, because we're going to spend time um, understanding this. I'm going to talk about variables, etc. But here is a whole bunch of variables that I'm creating, okay, in some PHP, and then I'm outputting a table that's going to have three columns: type, value, and get type response. And so what I'm going to list is in the first row right here, I'm saying this is a Boolean. I'm going to say what its value is. And then this is going to be the output of get type Boolean. Now notice, remember I told you that PHP starts out with a left angle bracket PHP and then closes with a question mark right angle bracket. This is something known as a short tag. You can look that up. And instead of left angle bracket PHP, the left angle bracket question mark equal sign is a shortcut for essentially left angle bracket PHP echo. So what I'm doing is I'm echoing the results of this. Now, if you remember when I took you there in the manual, it said that get type would return a string. So it's just going to output the results of get type right in between these um, uh, table data item right here. Okay, and so each row is doing the same thing. Okay, so that's how this script works. So let's go back over into our VM. I'm going to copy it, and it's copied to the clipboard. I'm going to go out to my editor. I'm going to paste it in. There it is, right there. And then I'm going to save it. Now, when you first open this editor up, you press, I typed Control S. It's actually wanting to save it in my student directory. I don't want to save it in my student directory. And what I'm going to call it is, I'm just going to call this, I forget what we called it in the, we called it, I'll name it the same thing, data types.php. Okay, so we'll type in data types.php, but don't click save. Go over to HTML, go to demos, go to week 2, so that's where we're at, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. So now that's in there, and you'll notice that because I saved it as a PHP file, I'm getting all the nice syntax highlighting that tells me what's going on here. Okay, great. So if I go back over to my folder in week 2 of demos, you'll see it's there. And if I go into my browser and come over here to index and refresh, you'll see there's the data types. So I'm just going to select it, and then you see this is the output that we get. Okay, so this is the result of the get type. So I just wanted to show you how that worked. Okay, so going back over to the lecture notes, we'll talk a little bit about variables. So PHP supports essentially 3 different kinds of variables: predefined, and those are ones like pi, constants like pi, etc., or super global variables, which are really form variables. But and then there's user-defined variables, um, and those are the ones that you define. And then form variables, which are related to the names in an HTML form. So they're going to be the things that are based to when you enter data into a form, for example, and you want to get that data out into your script, we're going to be accessing a superglobal variable. In our case, it'll be the post superglobal variable, and those are form variables, and we'll talk more about that. So valid variable names in PHP have essentially, they look like this. They start with a $sign and they're followed by either a letter or an underscore. So these are legal variable names. These over here are invalid variable names. I can't start with a number. I have to have the $sign. I can't have this pound sign in here. No $sign here. And I can't start with a number. Okay. All right. This is the same code. Now I want to talk a little bit about this idea of string interpolation, also concatenation. So um, I could output, in fact, I could output this PHP right here. And notice I have double quotes here, and I've got a variable inside of here. Or I can concatenate, and the concatenation would be using the dot operator, whereas in JavaScript it was the plus, which overloads the addition operator. I really like using the dot operator. It's less confusing than using the plus sign. So this is great right here. But I want to kind of show you some subtleties of this whole interpolation thing and what variable interpolation is and why you have to use the double quotes. So let's say let's go to my VM here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up start another script. So let's say I'm going to create this PHP script and we'll call it, I'm going to just save it and I'll call it interpolation.php. All right, so I want to create a name. I'll say a variable called name, and I'll put my name in it. Okay, now this could be single or double quotes, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to say echo hello $name. And then I'm going to say echo hello $name. So these are going to function differently. And the clue is kind of in this color coding that you're getting right here. So line 4 is actually going to output the interpolated value of name. So that's going to actually output hello Ken Marks, whereas line 5 is going to echo out verbatim whatever inside of these single quotes. Okay, so that's really important to know. In fact, I could even I'll embed the single quotes right in here, and then I'll put double quotes right here. That's not going to make a difference, but and you'll see that I'm still going to get the same output. But so I'm going to run that, and you can see what's going on here. I'll go ahead and take those quotes out just in case there's any confusion. Refresh, and there we go. So you can see the first line of output is actually interpolating the value of the variable. And this one right here is just literally putting out what's in single quotes. So double quotes are really important for when you want to interpolate values. And that's going to be very important when we are creating SQL statements based on data coming into a form that we want to query for in our for our database queries. Okay. So moving on, because PHP is a dynamically typed language, we have some functions that we can use for managing our variables. So for example, if somebody enters in, and something you need to remember is all data entered into form fields has the data type of string. You learned that last semester in JavaScript. That's always true. Anytime somebody enters in something in a form, it's always coming into your program as string data. So if you need to convert it, you can convert it. You can check to see if it's numeric or verify if it's numeric. You can verify if it's an integer, if it's a string, et cetera, et cetera. A couple important functions that you'll see used a lot is this isSet, which says it determines if a variable is declared and is different than null. So this means that if a variable is declared and it is different than, determine if a variable is considered set. This means if a variable is declared and is different than null. And that'll make more sense as we go on. Empty is slightly different. It determines whether a variable is empty. Okay, we'll talk a little more about that. A variable is considered empty if it does not exist or if its value equals false. Okay, all right. So this is really, these are important to use when you're checking, for example, values that are coming back from somebody entering data into a form if you want to enforce that they enter data in, etc. Okay. PHP also allows you to create constants. You can create a constant by using the define function. So the define function is going to take two parameters. The first parameter is going to be the string that we're creating for our definition. And then the second parameter is going to be whatever its value is. It can be anything, an integer, a floating point, a string, doesn't matter. And then if this is how we would use it, if we say echo boiling temp in Celsius, then that would output whatever we defined it as. Okay. Okay. So let's get into talking a little bit about forms and how we get data into our PHP script. So let's take a look at this particular form right here. Okay, so this is a simple form. It's basically we're going to enter our name, our phone number, our email address. It's got a submit button, and the form has the action to call the postFormProcess.php script. Okay, and the method is going to be post. Right? So let's go ahead and create this in our VM. So I'll go ahead and start up another document here. I will go to the lecture notes that I have over here. I'm going to scroll down to the form. I'm going to copy that and I will paste that in here. And we're going to call it post form process. I think this is easy. I'll just do it this way. Post form process.php or .html. Excuse me. Post form. I'm sorry, not post form process. Post form.html. Okay, so there it is. And then we got our highlighting. So if we go to our local host right here, hit the back button, refresh, we're in our demos 2 week 2 folder. I select this. I could enter some stuff in. There's phone number, something at nothing.com. And what's going to happen if I press submit? Well, we know what should happen. I should get a 404 error because it's going to go out and look for, if I go back to the notes here, it's going to look for where's the form? There it is. It's going to look for postformprocess.php. And I haven't written that yet. And so that's going to be an error. So let's submit. There it is. 404 not found. So we got to write that. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. And one thing I want you to take a look at first before we go there. Notice the value of the name attributes. Okay? So just notice what they are set to. Notice the string values that these name attributes are set as. Okay, so let's go to post form process. Okay, now let's take a look at this. Now, what happens is when this is called, when we hit the submit button, this is the script that's going to get called. So I'm going to output, here is the form input, and then all of this gets handed to the PHP interpreter right here from the web server. So this right here is the post superglobal variable. It's a variable because it's denoted by a $sign. And this is what we use to get access to field entries that our user entered into the form. Now, remember I asked you to take a look at the name attributes of the fields, and you notice we had your name, your phone, and your email. And instead of using like 0, 1, and 2, which we wouldn't use it in the post superglobal variable, but PHP allows for these arrays called associative arrays. So I'm associating the name, the string of the name attribute as the key, which will give me the value. This is going to return me the value that the user entered in that particular field name of the form. So that's going to be assigned to a variable I created here called name, one called phone, one called email. And then notice I'm using string interpolation right here to output um, the contents of these variables. Okay, so welcome to PHP, whatever your name is, can I call you at whatever your phone number is it okay to send you email at this email? So let me copy that. I can't do it here. Remember, got to be in the VM. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll create a new script. We will go out over here and we'll click on post form process, and we'll copy that. We'll go out to our blank document, paste that in, save it, and we're going to save it as postformprocess.php. And save it. There it is. Now I can go run it. I hit refresh. Now I don't want to click on that. I want to click on the postform.html. So I will put all this information here, press submit, and there we go. Welcome to PHP, Ken. Can I call you at? These are all the entries that I entered in on the field. And so that's how you get data from your form into your PHP script. Okay. So let's see. We'll talk about this in cross-site request forgery, probably not in week 15. I have a chapter in the book on security that covers this a little bit. Okay, PHP coding rules. So PHP code, as I mentioned, is always enclosed by the left angle bracket PHP and the question mark left angle bracket question mark PHP and the question mark right angle bracket. Also, I can use short tags, which would be left angle bracket question mark equal, which is the same thing as saying echo um, and echoing out something like this or whatever. You'll see that in PHP scripts. Every PHP statement must end with a semicolon. If there is any PHP code in a web page, the file on the web server should be named with the .php extension, not the .html extension. PHP variable names must begin with a $sign. Variable name must be at least one character in length. The first character after the $sign can be a letter or an underscore, and characters after that can be a letter, an underscore, or a number. Spaces and special characters other than the underscore and $sign are not allowed in any part of a variable name. So I kind of showed you a little bit about the post superglobal. The post, so the post SuperGlobal, and I have a link out here, so you can go out there and read up on that if you'd like. Um, in the manual, it is a special variable called a superglobal built into PHP that holds form data and is available throughout an entire script. Post is an array, and you access the form data by using the name attributes as indexed keys into the array. And so I showed you an example. I'm going to go ahead and I want you to actually use this particular example as well, because we're going to do a little activity. So let's just create this form. Okay, this is essentially what we just did, but we're going to create, I'll just make it super simple here. So let's go back to our, what are we calling this? We're calling it full name. Yep, okay, we'll call it full name. So what I want you to do is go back to your editor. We'll get rid of this. We'll create a new script right here, and you're going to create a file called fullname.html. So I want to go out to the lecture notes right here, scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to grab this whole thing right here. You can do the same if you want. Oops, let's do that again. Copy to clipboard. We'll go paste that in here. And then we'll go ahead and hopefully that doesn't error out. Let's see, is that going to error out? No, I think that'll be fine. Find out soon enough. So we'll save this as fullname.html. Okay, take a look. Hopefully that works. We'll see. And then, okay, so let's take a quick look at it. So it's a simple full name script. It's got a form, an action that's going to call fullname.php, a method for post. The method is post. So I've got two fields and a submit button. So two text fields and a submit button. The name attribute for the first is called first name, and the name attribute for the second one is called last name. And then we have a submit button. Let's see what happens when we bring that up. Okay, so we go full name. I'll type in Ken Marks. If I select the button called report full name, it should give me a 404 because it couldn't find fullname.php. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to, in fact, let's go back to the lecture notes here. We'll say the two name attributes in the form are first name and last name. You access the data in those name attributes using first name and last name as index keys into the post superglobal. So here's the full name.php. And so there's first name, there's first name, there's last name. Those were the name attributes right here for those fields. And then I just arbitrarily called them first underscore name and last underscore name, and then I'm echoing this out right here. So I'm going to go ahead and create that script. Okay. So we'll go out to right down here, the lecture notes that I have in here. We'll grab it, paste it in, and then we're going to call it fullname.php. S fullname.php. Save that. All right, so now if we go back out to our localhost and in our demos week 2 folder, if I select, you don't want to select full name.php because you're going to get all this undefined index stuff because we didn't define it. So you want to go to full name.html. I'll put Ken, I'll put Marks, port full name. It says, hi, Ken Marks, thanks for submitting the form. Not really interesting, but we're gonna kind of make it interesting because we're gonna go ahead and eventually take these entries and put it in a database table. Okay. So that brings me to talking about MySQL. So in PHP, we're going to not only are we going to be interacting with HTML and some CSS, but you're also going to be interacting with a database. So a MySQL server can contain multiple databases, and your database can contain multiple tables. PHP can communicate easily with your database. So what I want you to do at this point is let's do this demo lab. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let's follow all these instructions. In fact, if I go, I've got that up on the lecture notes right here. We scroll down and do the demo lab. What I want you to do is I want you to bring up a terminal window or a console. Okay, so this right here is your terminal window, and I thought that I may have gone through that with you on getting to know your LAMP stack environment, your LAMP environment. So this is the terminal window. It default puts you into your home directory. So if we were to go out to our home directory, you'll see I have desktop, documents, downloads, all these folders, and this stuff right here, examples.desktop. If I type ls, you see those same folders. Folders are listed in blue, and then files are going to be in white right here. If I want to get some details, I can add these switches called AL, which is all information and long listing. So that gives me all sorts of details like permission, who owns it, how big it is, what the date it was last modified, created, etc. So lots of information. So I'm going to head on back to where we were before in our demos week 2 folder. And let's go back to our folder here, right here. So I'm going to go into CD downloads. Let's see what's in there. Oh, we already have the northwind.sql. Well, if you didn't have the northwind.sql file in there, you could actually just go grab, this says use wget to get the SQL file. So you can actually copy it right here. And if we go to the right click and paste, that'll paste that in. And oh, if you see command not found for wget, we could type in, oh, I know what the problem is. The problem is that it actually grabbed the $sign. That's an error. There we go. And now it actually downloaded it. So I should have 2 copies of it. So I don't need 2 copies of this. So I'm just going to remove. And I can either remove it in the file browser, or I can type part of it, press tab, we'll do tab completion, and then I'm just going to remove that file. So we got the northwind.sql. All right, let's go look at the rest of the instructions. Now what we're going to do is we're going to log into our MySQL server. Now we have a couple ways that we can do this. One way I'm going to show you now is through the command line. In the book, I show you how to use adminer, but let's type MySQL -u for user, and the user is going to be student, -p to ask for the password. The password is student. And as you're typing, you don't see anything written down here, which is fine. That's kind of a security measure. So you would just type it in, press enter, and now you're no longer in the bash script. In the bash script, you know you're in it because you see what folder you're in and the $sign. Now I'm in the MySQL command line tool. Okay, so So when you are doing commands in the MySQL CLI or command line interface, make sure that you are in the command line tool, not in Bash shell. Okay. All right. So you're now in the MySQL command line interface. Create the Northwind database. So first, what we need to do is we need to create the database. See, if I say show databases, it's going to show me it's a stock install of MySQL. Okay. So what I'll do is I will say create database. And so these shouldn't be new to you. You should have learned this in your database 1 class. And then Northwind and end with a semicolon. Press enter and it says query OK. So we're good. I say show databases. You see I've got the Northwind database, but it's empty. So I need to exit out. Okay. And then we're going to we're back now at the Bash shell. And now I want to run MySQL, and I have to give it my credentials. I have to do this again, -u, -p, it'll ask for the credentials. But what I am telling it to do on the Bash shell is I'm saying I want the MySQL command to work on the Northwind database, but I've got this funky left angle bracket and then that file that we just downloaded, northwind.sql. So instead of me typing in a whole bunch of SQL commands in the command line interface, the actual Northwind database file that we just downloaded has all those commands in it. So that's going to go ahead and basically import all of the tables for Northwind. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that on the command line, press enter, and it'll want me to enter the password. So that's student. And in typical Unix fashion, if there's no error, then I'll get no response. All right, well, how do I know it worked? Well, I'll go back into the database, into the MySQL command line tool, command line interface, and I can just hit up arrow a couple times, and there it is. And I'll type student. And then I'm going to say use Northwind. It says database has changed. And then I'm going to say show tables. And there are a whole bunch of tables that we just imported. Okay, next thing I want to do is let's take a look at the products. So I'm going to use this command called describe. And then products has to be spelled, this is the products table, has to be spelled exactly, put a semicolon. And so it's telling me all the fields, so it's got all these fields, and the product ID is the primary key. Modern day mechanism for adding primary key field to your table is just to call it lowercase ID. But it's telling me what the data types are, whether it's a primary key, whether it could be null or not, so all sorts of information. And if I go ahead and type select star from products, I will get a complete listing of the whole products table. Now what I could do, if we go back up here, I could say, let's see, so we'll say unit price, we'll say product name and unit price. Okay, so we could say, instead of select star, we could say, well, first, let's do this. We'll say describe products, and then we'll say select product name, unit price from products. And there we go. So that looks a little nicer ASCII art here. Okay. All right. And there's just some questions here. I usually have, when I'm teaching this face-to-face, have students do this and then answer these questions. Now we're going to do part two. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go out of the MySQL command. Well, we can stay in the command line tool, the MySQL command line tool. But we're going to create a database. Let me scroll up here. I want you to create a database using your Madison College user email username. Okay, so my email name is kemarks1. Yours is going to be different. So you'll say create. Remember, you got to be in MySQL. Create database, and we'll call it. Mine's going to be kemarks1. So I created that database. Now we want to use. Let's say use. Yep, just need to say the name of the name of the database. Use kemarks1. Now we're using it. And then if I say show tables, there are none. Okay, it's empty. So we're gonna say create table, and you can just copy and paste this if you want. So you want to create a table called full name. You can type it in if you want. If you don't get it right, it'll give you some errors. You eventually need to do this. But we're going to create a table with two fields in it, one called first underscore name with varchar 20, and then one with last underscore name with a varchar 20. So I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, and then what we'll do is I'm going to insert my name in there. You can do the same thing. Change that to insert your name. And then if I say select star from full name, that's what I should get. So the lab here says enter in a couple more, do a select, and then exit out. So feel free to pause the video so you can work on that and make sure you have that going before you go to the next item the next thing we're going to do. Okay, so we've created a database and of a table to hold our full name. Now what we're going to do is we're going to modify our full name .php script so we can connect to the database and take the data from the form that comes in and insert it into our database. So we're using that same form above for entering a full name along with database that we just created. But we need to modify the PHP script, the full name.php script. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we're going to need to connect to the database in our PHP script. We'll do that through this function called MySQL I connect. So all these functions are MySQL I functions. And the credentials that we're going to use is they're all of these 4 parameters that we're using, and there are additional optional ones, but these are the ones we're going to use. They're strings. So the first parameter is the URL, or the location of the database. We're working on our VM, and that's going to be localhost. So everything, if we go back over here to where we're running, it's localhost. So that's our server name. That's where our database is also connected to. Okay, so localhost, and the credentials are to our student. So that's how we log in. The username is student, the password is student. And then we have to give it the last string, the last parameter is going to be what's the name of the database. And it's whatever whatever you named your database. So hopefully you named it your email username for your MATC email username. Then I've got this or die statement that will, if we fail, if any of these are wrong, then you'll get this message that pops up and the script will quit. Okay, so after we connect to the database, then what we want to do is we want to create a query string. Okay, and so this query string looks very much like the demo that we just did, but remember, we're using string interpolation, so we have to use double quoted strings. So this is just a concatenation of this double quoted string right here. So we're saying insert into full name. And remember, we called the field names first underscore name and last underscore name. But the actual values, since we are entering strings, they need to be within a single quote because we're using double quotes. So they need to be a string. So we'll just use a single quote. But we're going to interpolate what's in first name that we set from the post super global because we're encapsulating the whole string in double quotes. And we're going to do that for last name as well. So we have this query string. Then what we need to do is we need to pass the query string into the MySQLi query function. And that takes two parameters. The first parameter is going to be the database resource connection that we got by calling it MySQLi connect. And then we're going to pass in the query. And then if we have a failure because we have maybe some malformed SQL, and so I want to tell you now, 90% of the errors that you are going to have a hard time finding are going to be because of these malformed SQL statements. And so I'll give you a few hints, and there are some hints in chapter 12 on how to do some debugging and find these errors. So we pass that off, and then when we're done, we'll just make a call to MySQLi close, which will close the database, our connection to the database. So here is what the complete PHP script looks like right here. And so all we did was we actually just added these things right here. So let's go back to the on my VM here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab these three right here. And then I'm going to go into the code, go into my editor, go into full name, and then I'm just going to put my cursor right here and paste that in there. And so the change that you're going to have to make is this change right here. Also, that's wrong, isn't it? Oops, let's refresh that. How do I fix that? Okay, this right here should be student, and this should be student right here. I'll make sure that that's fixed in the lecture notes. Yeah, so I'll fix that in the lecture notes. So let me go ahead and make sure I change that. Okay, so that's going to be student, and this will be student. Save that. And let's go ahead and go to my demo here. I'm going to rerun fullname.html. Okay, so I'm going to add my brother's name in here. And okay, we got no errors. So let's go to back into our MySQL command line tool, and let's use KEMarks1, and then we'll say select star from full name, and there it is. It worked. So that should work for you as well. Some problems that you might run into, and I cover this in detail in chapter 12 of your book. So let's see. If I were to, and in fact, there's a better way to get the error printed out. So let's do this. Let's instigate an error. Let's say, for example, I spelled this wrong, first name, okay, the field name. So if I go out to here and I'm going to put my sister's name in here and press report full name, I get error querying database. Well, that's not very useful, right? So maybe what I want is some more, I want to troubleshoot this. One thing, let me see if I can actually do this. Okay. One thing we could do is we could say, I'm going to rewrite this code and let's see if this works. I'm going to do a little experiment here. Instead of or die, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to say or trigger error. Okay, and we'll say query error description. And then in that quote, then I'm going to concatenate in here my SQLi underscore error. Okay, and this function is going to take, let's do this. Yep, this will do, yep. It takes the DBC, so that's the actual connection right here, and then this is trigger error actually takes two parameters. So we'll just say e underscore user warning. Okay, so there's a lot of magic I'm not explaining to you, but this will give us better output for what our error is. So let me save that. If I didn't do that right, I'm going to show you another way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to see what happens when I do this now. Aha! Look at that. Query error description, unknown column, first name in field, and it tells you exactly what line of code, and it tells you that it's an unknown column. So that is going to give you a lot of hints right there. So we know that's an unknown column, and we're like, oh shoot, I misspelled it. So let's go ahead and put an underscore right over there. Save that. The back button, hit report full name, and then that's all good. And then we should just have that one single entry. So we're good. My sister made it into the database. Okay. So with that, that is going to conclude the lecture. And what I want to talk to you about is the week 2 lab. And this is pretty brief. So there's two ways to get to this. At the end of the lecture notes, I will have the lab, a link to the appropriate lab. Plus, you can go to the lab, select the appropriate week right here. And so what I have you doing is I want you to complete the following exercises in chapters 3, 4, 5, 8, and 11. I'm pretty sure that I don't want you to do anything in chapter 12 just yet. I might add chapter 12 in here, I think. I think I might. Let's see, do I want you to do that? Yep. Yes. So I'm going to add in here chapter 12 as well. Exercise, what is it? Exercise number 1. Okay. So let's make sure that that's exactly what. Yep. Okay, we'll do that. All right. So sorry that I'm jumping around over here. So I want you to do chapters. I want you to do I think these are all the exercises in chapter 3, chapter 4, 1 and 2 in chapter 8, 1 in chapter 11, and 1 in chapter 12. So the testing requirements are going to be, I want you to include screenshots of all of your output. I want you to complete all of your labs in the labs week 2 folder. Dump your database if you're asked, either using MySQL command line interface or adminer, and I show you how to do that in the book. And I want you to save it in your Labs Week 2 folder. Test all of your code and include your screenshots in a folder called Labs Week 2 Screenshots. Okay, compress your Labs Week 2 folder with your completed labs and dump database and submit it into Blackboard. So uh, in your VM, so you're going to so that's going to basically be when you're all done, you're going to your labs folder, you're going to have, you're going to create a folder in here called screenshots. Okay. And then you're going to have all your source files in here, your screenshots in here, your dump database in here. Come back out here. Oh, that was from last week. You can delete that. You'll compress your week 2 folder to a zip file. You'll go to Blackboard to the weekly lab submissions. Week 2 will be open for you. You'll click on that, and then you'll just drag it, drag it in right over to here. Should be good to go. Let's see if I can do it from here. Yep, just drag it in right here, and there you go. And then hit the submit button, and you're good to go on that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on Slack. For my hybrid students, please come into class. That's the time to ask questions of me and also collaborate with your fellow students. Have a fantastic week.